Namaste and good morning, everyone. Let's start our Saturday class with the prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Bhurbhavaswaha, Tatsavitra Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. अस्तो मा सत्यम्य तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गम्य मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गम्य ओम सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सवीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ओम शांति शांति शांति. Right from the beginning, we've been learning about Samadhi, different kinds of Samadhi. And we know that Samadhi is a state of consciousness in which our core being is fully established in its essential nature. That's what Rishi Patanjali told us. Right at the beginning of the scripture, in the Samadhi Pad. Then he told us that we got to get ourselves free of the 5 afflictions. Pain and the sorrows, those afflictions which cause. Then in this chapter also, he has been telling us a certain techniques, how to reach there. And then 2 terms, Vivek Khyati and Sattvapati, he has been using to bring our attention towards this goal. Now with this verse number 29 in chapter number 2, he is really going into the detail of what we need to do as an aspirant, as an abhyasi. In fact, almost 26, 27 sutras are devoted for this, because he knew that some of the new students like us, we need the techniques in the detail also. Not just the goal itself, not just a vague idea, but we need to know exactly what we need to do. So let's start today's class with verse number 29. Yama, Niyam, Asana, Pranayam, apratyaharadharanadhy, Dhyana, anasamadhayo-a-shtava, anggani. Yam means self-control, restraint. That's called Yama. Niyam, keeping a firm resolve. Asana, physical posture. Steady and comfortable pose. That's asana. Pranayama, mastery of the pranic force. Breathing practice. And pratyahara, it's recalling the senses, bringing the senses inward. Dharana, concentration. Focusing the mind on a chosen object. That's a dharana. Dhyana is meditation, uninterrupted flow of the same or similar cognitions for a prolonged and uninterrupted flow of concentration. That's meditation. Samadhi, perfect stillness, pristine state of mind. or you can call it a homogeneous awareness. That is a state where the object of cognition and the process of cognition and the awareness of oneself have merged into single. Asht means 8. Angani means limbs, ang, components. This is called Ashtanga Yoga. Restraint, observance, physical posture, mastery of the pranic force, recalling the senses, concentration, meditation, and spiritual absorption are the 8 components of yoga. I'm sure most of you have memorized these. If you have not, try to memorize these. This is a ABC for us yoga abhyasis. Strongest and the most deeply rooted among all these sanskars is called a vipraya jnana vasana. Our uncompromising loyalty to our mistaken identity. That means not knowing yourself. We are the Atma, which is part of Paramatma, but we are just so strongly believe that no, we are the body. That is called a vipraya jnana vasana. This sanskar is called avidya. And this is the breeding ground for all other sanskars, which are cluttering in our mind. That means that is the root cause of the other vasanas. When we practice these 8 components of yoga, the impurities which are originating from avidya and which are also nurtured by it, gradually, eventually, they get destroyed. This is what Rishi Patanjali is telling us. So that's why very important to practice, but before practicing, understanding, memorizing, making it very important for us. Just like when we went to our elementary schools, we were told to memorize the ABC, ka, kha, ga, 1, 2, 3, the tables, all those things. This is a very basic knowledge for a yoga abhyasi. We'll see that Rishi Patanjali will explain later in the 3rd chapter about these Ashtanga. He will say the first 5 are external limbs. That means Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, and Pratyahara. They are the Bahir Anga, external limbs. And the last 3, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi, they are the Antaranga Anga, the limbs, the internal limbs, Antaranga. So practicing the external components help us rid ourselves of impurities that have their source in the external world. Those things which have contaminated our body, distorted our behavior. These impurities include generally like an unhealthy lifestyle, environmental contamination, unnatural breathing, disturbed sleep, religious and ideological toxins. These are just a few of them. And the internal components, like a concentration, meditation, and samadhi, they help us attain freedom from impurities that have their source in our mental world, the inner world. And principal among these impurities are our sanskars, roaming tendencies of our mind. We just keep on holding on to those tendencies. That's how they keep on growing too. But remember that these two categories of impurities always go hand in hand. In the presence of one, the other is bound to form. Just like a mercury poisoning is an external impurity, which can cause a variety of physical and neurological disorders. But ultimately, what will happen? That is a ground for mental agitation also. So external seeps into the internal. In the same way, internally, if we have a fear and anger, those are internal impurities which can destabilize our mind, but ultimately can disrupt many of our physical functions also. So that's why I was saying that these two categories of impurities go hand in hand. That's why these rishis, the yogis, they say that make sure you do the practices which will help you at the external level and as well as the internal level. So the relationship between our body and mind is very deep. So that's why the external limbs of yoga, which have a direct effect on our physical well-being, greatly enhance our mental well-being. And our meditation, which infuses our mind with clarity and stillness, will restore our harmonious functions of our brain and nervous system. So remember, all 8 limbs of yoga are to be applied together. Definitely, they are listed sequentially only for the sake of study. Because the first one is what? The yama. That doesn't mean that we got to go through all the yams first and then we'll reach the asana or the niyams. No. Or the pranayam. We got to do all of them. But let's try to understand individually what they are. We'll see in the next 26 sutras, Rishi Patanjali is addressing each of the 5 external components separately and tell us how to apply them in our daily life. So external first and then internal he will go through. So verse number 30, he talks about the very first one, Yama. You remember, first is Yama, then Niyam. So he says, Yam is Ahinsasatyasteyabrahmacharyaparigraha, yamah. Ahimsa, non-violence, non-harming, lack of animosity. Or you can even say that abiding in the principles of friendliness, love, and compassion. That is ahimsa. Satya, truthfulness, not lying. And eventually constant awareness of the higher reality, that is Satya. Asteya, non-stealing. Refraining from having that which is not rightfully ours. Brahmacharya, self-control. Conserving your energy. All psycho-energetic resources we need to conserve. Only then we will realize the all-pervading consciousness. Aparigraha, non-holding, non-possessiveness. Yama, restraints. Non-violence, truthfulness, non-stealing, self-control, and non-possessiveness are the restraints. Okay, the first limb on that Ashtanga Yoga has 5 subdivisions. On the surface, it appears that embracing these 5 restraints will help us build a solid foundation for changing our behavior. They will bring a noble and respectable person in us if we follow these 5. We can become exemplary. And we will not become a source of fear for anyone. These restraints make our lifestyle simple. It will give us plenty of time and energy to attend to our core mission, which is a yoga sadhana. Because with the help of that sadhana, we are going to attain our goal of life. This in itself is a great accomplishment if you think about it. So ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. Memorize these 5 also. All these yams, restraints, or even the observances which we're going to see later on, are rooted in ahimsa. See, just like all the afflictions, they are rooted in avidya. All these yam and the niyams, they are rooted in ahimsa. They are to be practiced to attain perfection in ahimsa. That's why it said ahimsa paramo dharma. And remember, ahimsa is a non-animosity toward all living beings, all the time, and in every respect. So that means physically, verbally, mentally. All of us are afflicted with fear. All fear culminates in fear of death, which is the epitome of loss. And fear is always accompanied by attachment, aversion, false notion of self-identity. And it has the roots in avidya. The less we know, more fearful we are. So avidya is our strong attachment to what is contradicted by our intuition. We know the unimaginably vast universe. It existed long before we were born. We know the force behind the creation is infinitely more intelligent and capable than we are. As human beings, what do? We demand proof. That is avidya. We say we want to see God, only then we'll believe God. That is avidya. That's a work of the avidya in a human mind. Remember, when we are dead, we are nothing. As a body, if we think we are the body, we are nothing. From this nothingness, we emerge as a living being. The one who turns the dead into the living and gives us an identity is not only omnipotent, but also selfless, infinitely kind, yet we doubt. We doubt the flow of its love and guidance. That is the work of avidya. So under the influence of avidya, we defend our self-identity. The avidya-driven urge for self-defense forces us to build a wall around ourselves. This is how the sense of duality is born. Me and mine. I want to protect it. While living within the confines of duality, we are cut off from the immortal, eternal core of our being. And the immortal in us is enveloped by the experience of the mortality. This is the fear. If we don't check it, it will continue to perpetuate itself. We all know that fear is pervasive. We are all consumed by the urge to defend ourselves, protect our existence. And this urge impels us to take the offense at the slightest provocation. All living beings, from single-celled organisms to complex entities, are continually emitting their innate fear. So that's how this whole world is filled with the fearful energy. So we are living in a world run by fear constantly. The more evolved a creature in intelligence, the more intense and goal-driven is the fear it emits. So that's why, as human beings, we are highly evolved. So the fear contained in us is more intense, more definitive than in many other creatures. Because animals fight, they hunt, but for obvious reasons. Procreation and food. We fight for very subtle reasons. What are those reasons? Power, possessions, prestige, fame. An animal's fear is regulated by nature, so its range of enemies is limited. On the other hand, as human beings, our fear is propelled by crystallized avidya, which has given birth to a highly afflicted mind. We know there's no limit to our desires, cravings, ambitions. So this stretches the range of our enemies to an almost limitless size. We all know that animosity is very subtle. It's subtler than the physical or verbal retaliation against a person or even a group with the potential to harm us. Animosity. The scriptures they talk about when they describe this subtle nature of fear-born animosity, precise term for this is abhidroha. Intense aversion that captures our mind from every direction. Abhidroha. It is a mental condition. With that mental condition, anger arises towards those we dislike. Abhidroha. So, in other words, intense aversion coupled with anger is abhidroha. And that is a fundamental force behind animosity. The reason I'm going into the detail, because this ahimsa is so powerful. If we don't restrain it, and in order to restrain, we got to understand it. We cannot call ourselves that we are following the path of ahimsa because I never hit anybody. It's very subtle. We got to look at our mind. In those little grooves of our mind, what kind of a sanskars we have. Even at the ashram, I see some of the students, when they see a little bug, very gently they pick it up on a piece of paper and take it outside. And there are others, they'll smash it. That really speaks, the action is speaking very loudly what the vasanas are, or how we talk, how we walk, how we sit, how we eat. Animosity is always preceded by a strong sense of self-identity. Anyone or anything that threatens our self-identity is our enemy. Individual, it could be an individual or an ethnic or religious group or an ideology contrary to our beliefs. Could be anything. This subtle force of animosity not only makes us shout, shoot our neighbors, or bomb other nations, it also makes us harm our most intimate friend, Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is the essence of our inner intelligence. That is why ahimsa is embracing the practice of non-animosity toward all living beings all the time and in every respect. Remaining four restraints, remember, they are rooted in ahimsa. When we are not established in ahimsa, in other words, if we have not conquered the primitive urge of self-preservation, we find ourselves under enormous pressure to manipulate our conscience, fabricate evidence, obstruct justice, and everything possible to justify our intentions and actions. And we are bound to commit violence. Okay, it could be again at the mental level, verbal level. See, verbally, when we are putting somebody down, that is hinsa. Verbally, or even at a thought level, thinking. So this is very extremely subtle form of a hinsa, is hidden in the deepest recesses of our mind. For countless lives, we have been using this subtle element of violence to defend ourselves. We want to eliminate those who pose a threat to our self-identity. And we have convinced ourselves that this is a strength. It's driven by our subhuman tendencies. We say that it is to protect and nurture at any cost. Misled by this destructive urge, we lie. That's why first is the hinsa, the next is the lie. That is, lie is opposite of satya. To hide our lies, or to hide even a one lie, we tell 10 lies. And in the process, we damage our conscience, we hurt others, disrupt the peace in both our inner and outer worlds. And the same tendency convinces our mind and senses to claim things that are not ours. That is stealing. Satya. Recklessly we do that. And we consume indiscriminately. And this is how we fall from satya, the truthfulness, engage in satya, stealing, get caught up in brahmacharya, sensuality, and become obsessed with parigraha, worldly possessions. So it's just like instead of going up by following these yams, we keep on sliding down. So that's why the remaining four, because it starts with ahimsa, then Satyasteyabrahmacharyaparigraha, the following four restraints, truthfulness, non-stealing, self-control, non-possessiveness, are rooted in ahimsa. Remember that, non-violence. Both ahimsa and hinsa are extremely subtle. To comprehend the dynamism of ahimsa and hinsa, we need a highly refined and perceptive mind. Ordinary people, people who are not studying this, people who are not sitting down and trying to conceptualize it, do not have the capacity even to detect the element of violence at the subtle level. Because this is very subtle. So embracing the practice of non-violence at this subtle level is beyond the scope of ordinary seekers. So that means that a student who has just started out on this path may not understand phenomena of lying, stealing, excessive sense gratification, obsession with worldly possessions. They definitely have destructive effects on us and on our society. at large also. So by restraining ourselves from lying, stealing, abusing our senses, and minimizing our mental and worldly possessions, we are automatically embracing the principle of ahimsa. That is why the practice of all these 5 restraints, we do it together actually. That's why Rishi Patanjali, he grouped it into as one Yama. Yeah. So the practice of the 5 restraints is the foundation for a wholesome life. Remember that. In spite of the differences in our spiritual, ideological, or professional orientation, we have a common goal. We all want to live a healthy life. We all want to fulfill the purpose of life. And to describe how these restraints serve as the ground for achieving this common goal, Patanjali is giving us another sutra, beautiful sutra, verse number 31. Jati desh kal samay anavachhinnah sarvabhauma mahavratam. So he calls them mahavrata. Jati. Jati means race or a group or ethnicity. Jati. Desh means a country, location, place. Kal means time. Samay means circumstance. Anavachhinnah, that which is not affected or confined. Sarvabhauma, universal, pertaining to every aspect of ground. See, sarv means all, bhauma means ground. Mahavratam, the great vow, the highest observance, or a guiding principle. So he's saying that these 5 restraints, because this is connected with the previous verse, the 5 restraints are not affected by the factors of class, race, place, time, and circumstance. They are universally applicable and constitute the great vows. These are the Mahavrats. Remember, the yoga sadhana can be divided into 2 major categories. Yoga for aspiring yogis, yoga for those who are accomplished. Aspiring yogis, definitely, they need to assess their current physical, emotional, intellectual capacities before they undertake the practice. So that means they got to just pay a little attention. What are they trying to do? Don't try to jump so high that you fall down. They must decide whether mild, intermediate, or intense yogic disciplines are appropriate for them or not. That's why the guidance is needed. This yoga sadhana is supposed to be, if you're serious about it, without a guru, can't do it. You can fall flat on your face. On the other hand, the accomplished masters must maintain the highest degree of discipline. Because you start out with a very lukewarm practice, then you keep on intensifying your practice. So accomplished masters, their practice is very intense. So in the previous sutra, Patanjali introduces those list of 5 yams. And the first restraint, ahimsa, is the ground for the remaining 4. And he says, yeah, you decide how stringently you are going to embrace them. In this particular sutra, the standard Patanjali is setting for practicing the 5 restraints for the accomplished yogis, those masters. For example, there are 2 standards for practicing ahimsa. We all know that killing a human being is a murder. Killing a fish is not. Killing a fish is a spiritual offense for a strict vegetarian, but not for a fisherman. Hunting in and around a shrine is an offense. Like if there's an ashram in the middle of the jungle, you cannot hunt around it. But hunting in the forest is not. So in a day-to-day life, it is a grave offense for a soldier to shoot someone. But it's not an offense for a soldier to kill an enemy on the battlefield. So in the early stages of yoga sadhana, these 5 restraints, Ahinsasatyasteyabrahmacharyaparigraha, can be practiced while paying heed to jati, our cultural and professional identities, desh, place, time, circumstance. But when you are in the higher stage, there's no room for compromise. No matter where you are, you got to follow these. We are expected to embrace these restraints without heeding our class, identity, place, time, or circumstance. In higher stages, not only must we practice these restraints in action, we must also practice them in speech and thought. So we got to keep on intensifying our practice. So whether we are at home, see, a beginner might say that, yes, at home I'll do my practice, I'll do my sadhana, but when I'm on vacation, or if somebody comes to my house, I will let it go. But a serious student says, no matter where I am, I got to devote enough time for my practice. A beginner will say, yeah, my relatives have come. I'm going to just let it go. I will not attend the satsang, or I will not do my duties towards God. But a serious student who is reaching up to that master level, no compromise there at all. In addition, we must observe the subtle motives behind our thoughts, speech, and action. So there is a degree of precision and perfection which is required so that we have a supremely refined practice. Only Pragya Shakti, the self-revealing power of our inner intelligence, can assess whether or not we have diligently embraced this highly refined practice of self-restraint, the Yama. It is important to remember that in this sutra, Rishi Patanjali is describing the characteristics of being established in the unblemished virtues of non-violence, truthfulness, etc. So the practice begins with cultivating these virtues until through consistent practice and self-reflection, we become established in them, fully established. And then later on, he will tell us the benefits of being established. We cannot say that, oh, I don't lie anymore. And each word I speak, it should become true. Because he's going to tell us that when you are firmly established, no matter what you say, it will come true. I saw that my Guruji, we would just go to him, get the blessings, knowing those blessings will come true, and they always did. Because his words were the words of God. He was fully established in it. This is what we'll see. The outcome of being fully established. No matter where you are, what a time it is, what is your race, what the circumstances are. So for an aspiring yogis, the practice begins with cultivating these virtues until through consistent practice and self-reflection, we become established in them. That's why every night before you sleep, reflect upon them. Did I utter a lie today? Did I think about lying? Did I move away from the truthfulness or the non-violence? Were my senses in my control all day long? Or not? This reflection, daily reflection, is very important. Until that time, we practice these restraints and one of the limbs of yoga. We got to continually raise the bar as we become stronger and more enlightened. We just don't want to say that, no, I don't tell a lie unless I have to save my face or bring a smile on somebody else's face. That's a lie too. That's why we got to keep on raising the bar. Next week, we'll see in the next sutra how he introduces the 5 observances, the niyams. That is a second of the 8 limbs. You remember Yama, Niyama. And try to memorize the 5 yams and the 8 limbs this week. Okay, so Ahinsasatyasteyabrahmacharyaparigraha. And the 8 limbs are, you all know. They are all written in your book. Write them on a piece of paper. See if you can memorize them. See, just like we learned how to memorize 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 100, and then backward also. 199 and 98 and 97. The same thing we do with this also. See if we can memorize or not. Okay, so we'll start next week's class with verse number 32. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much for coming.